Okay, folks, this is a video about Unit 4 overview. So if we think about it, we remember when we started studying, we talked about sampling and descriptive statistics. You may remember we talked about the different kinds of samples and so forth, the different types of data, frequency distribution. And then remember we talked about three things: the measure of the center, the spread, and the position or percentile. So that's what we got away from Unit 1. And of course, Unit 2, we talked about the basic ideas of probability. These are important things. Um, we talked about the addition rule, complements, conditional, all of that. And then we landed on this idea of the random variable, And that's where we started talking about probability distributions, and we used the idea of the histogram and so forth. That led us to the binomial distribution. And that was actually a very interesting part of the course. Those two ideas led us to the most common probability distribution in statistics, and that is the normal distribution. And we saw that applied to a lot of things in life. We could go on about that, but we're not. And then we realized that if we want to compare, for example, the heights of women and the heights of men, we need to have a standard way of comparison. We call that the standard normal curve. And I believe we went backwards and forwards in understanding the standard normal curve and how to realize that at the bottom of that curve, that goes up like this, at the bottom are the values of your random variable, if you would, and then the area under the curve was that 100%. And we talked about if I have two different numbers, can I find the area or the probability between them? We also realized that we could do percentiles on that normal curve, find the 25th percentile, and then we found out how to do these problems on our calculator, for example, inverse norm and so forth. Anyway, Unit 2, we did really learn a lot about the normal distribution, and we ended up talking about some applications of the normal distribution. I do believe that that is where you realize the power of understanding statistics, the nuts and bolts of statistics. And then we went to Unit 3. And in Unit 3, I'm sure we were a little scared about this idea of the central limit theorem, but we talked about sampling distributions. And then we made a big deal about this thing called the central limit theorem. What is the central limit theorem? The central limit theorem basically states that if you have a population and you take several samples of the population and find their means, the means of each sample, and you keep doing that over time, you can make a distribution of those means, and it will, one, look like a normal distribution. So we could use what we learned in the previous unit. That's really neat. And a very powerful idea, the mean of the sampling distribution of the means. I know that could get a little complicated. I really mean it though. But anyway, so the mean of the sampling distribution of the means is the mean of the population. Now that is a very powerful idea, and of course the reason is because very rarely do we know information about the population as far as was a level of certainty. So we know the mean now. That's very powerful. All right, so then what we did is we studied that out for a little bit to make sure we understood how it worked. And then we applied that. We applied the central limit theorem for proportions. We applied the central limit theorem for confidence intervals. So now I want to predict what I believe the population mean is. Without doing 30 million samples, we're going to do one sample. That's the key there. One sample, and we're going to use what we learned about the standard error of the mean to try to figure out with confidence what the actual mean of the population is. And you know what? Sometimes that's all that we need to know, a ballpark figure. Okay? A company may pour in a bunch of $1 million into research if they knew a number is within a certain range. So you could see the power You could see the power of this part of statistics. So again, these lessons we're trying to find, hey, what is the mean of the population? Maybe the height of women. Hey, what is the proportion? How many people are going to vote Democrat or vote Republican in the next election? Those are interesting things, and candidates are going to want to know that information. So we want to know what the possible mean of the population would be when we know the population standard deviation. We want to know what the mean of the population is when we don't know the mean of the standard deviation of the population. And that's where we factored in this T chart, or the T distribution, or a T interval. And that's important to remember because this is going to play out later. And of course, I'm assuming you kind of figured this out already. We don't always know the information about the population, don't always know the population standard deviation, and sometimes our sample is small. So we want to make those things known. And then in that lesson we talked about the confidence level for a population proportion. Okay, now, so let's talk about this unit. What is this unit about? This unit is about hypothesis testing. And what is hypothesis testing? And of course, there's one more section at the end where we talk about correlation and the least squares regression line. But let's get back to this idea. What in the world is hypothesis testing? Here it is. Someone claims that the mean of a population is a certain value. Let's just say that your tires in your car have a guarantee of 50,000 miles. See? Okay, and then the company's going to say, we claim that our tires, will last 50,000 miles. And what you want to do is you want to challenge that claim. Okay? So this is really all that it's doing. It's challenging a claim that is made about a parameter in a population. Pure and simple. Now, having said that, I spent a pretty good amount of time trying to do some outside reading, and I will share with you what you probably already know. A lot of people get confused about hypothesis testing, and you don't have to, okay? And I will try to give you a bare bones approach to this. Maybe I will fail, okay, but hopefully I won't, and that way you have something to latch onto. All right, enough said there. So what are the lesson topics in Unit 4? Well, the first thing we want to do is talk about the basics of hypothesis testing. What's the null hypothesis? How do I challenge a claim? We want to go through maybe a little bit of the basic procedure. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take a sample. So you're going to take a sample of the population, and you're going to come up with a number. And you're going to state how confident you are that the claim is true or the claim is not true. Now, this process of the rejecting the null hypothesis and all of this and the wording, this is just a standard way to do it. Honestly, it could probably be improved, okay? It's a little nerdy or awkward in the language, but bottom line is you could follow it and you could do this. All right. Lesson 19 is about basic, we already talked about that. Lesson 20 is about hypothesis testing for a population mean, and the standard deviation. Hey, doesn't that sound familiar? That was from the previous unit. So you're going to use the same ideas, all revolving around the idea of the central limit theorem, and you're going to be able to test a claim. Now that would be a very, very powerful thing. All right, lesson 20. Lesson 21 is testing for a mean, and you don't know the standard deviation. That sounds familiar. And then 22, well, hypothesis testing for proportions. Okay, what is the unemployment rate in America? Someone says it's 5.8%. Is that true? Let's actually follow that. And if you've been following that very carefully, you realize this issue of the unemployment rate has not been about the statistics. It's been about the way people are hiding, spinning, or whatever the statistics. But it gives statistics a bad name, and that's very, very unfortunate. All right, and then we're going to end up with lesson 23, where we talk about correlation and the least squares regression line. I think you've done this before. You'll recognize it when you see it. All right, so what are some uses of what we're talking about here? Bottom line here. Well, you want to market a new product and you think your battery is going to last much longer than such and such other battery, and you make a claim about your battery. Hey, let's get a sample of your batteries, okay, and let's test it. We realize now how batteries have improved, and a lot of the competition and the marketing and the free market, all of that, had a lot to do with how we arrived at some pretty interesting battery technology in modern times. So how about the MPG of your car? Okay. Hey, that is really, really important. My car gets 36 miles to a gallon. I own a Rolls. Okay. Well, actually, it's a Rolls can hardly, and that's a car that rolls down one hill, can hardly get up the other. But that's a whole another story. But 36 miles to a gallon for a 1999 car is really, really cool. All right. Another use would be medicine. Okay. I have glaucoma, and I have to use a drug called Travatan in my eyes. Well, interesting, when this was first found out, it was because of a misunderstanding or a deeper understanding of statistics that it was found out I had glaucoma. And if I wasn't treated, I wouldn't be looking at you at this camera right now and being able to see. I would be basically blind. So stuff is important. All right, so you want to come out with a new medicine, and the FDA is going to, quote, put their stamp of approval on it. There is going to be a lot of testing, and statistics is a big part of that. Or let's say you're trying to predict the weather. I think recently we had some bad storms come by, and everybody gets glued to their TV because they want to know where the weather's going to hit them. Or you're on the Weather Channel, and you're looking where the weather is heading. And now there's a little button called Future where you can see where it's going to go in the future. And bottom line, that started out with the idea of a regression line, the idea that we're going to talk about here. So predicting weather would be a more sophisticated, advanced topic of or application of what we'll be talking about. All right, let me get to some other things here. Let's talk about some advice. Okay, what would be some good advice? I would start out trying to get your definition or your terms down. Okay, get them down on a piece of paper. Think about the purpose of the hypothesis test. Try not to get sidetracked with the language. The purpose of a hypothesis test is to evaluate a claim. Basically, you're going to test it and see if it's false. Okay, if you don't have enough evidence against it, it stays. Okay, it just stays currently. If you have enough evidence against it, you could make it guilty of the crime of not being right. So you could reject that claim. That's important to remember the purpose of a hypothesis test. And then what I would do is what I did do. I have worked through this material. I have been in the trenches. I'm listening to the videos probably as much, if not more, than the average student in the class. So practice doing the problems. But try not to be like me when I was younger. I'd have a song on the headphones, the TV on, eating supper, and then trying to do my math work, okay? I wasn't really able to concentrate too well, and I remember doing it, but I didn't remember how much I learned from that. So please make sure that you're practicing. And then what we want to do is we want to finish strong on each of these lessons, and you could do that by doing a good job on your quiz. Remember, the quizzes are reinforcing what you're learning in the lessons. If you do not do the lessons and just spend time on the quizzes, All you're doing is learning how to answer quiz questions and praying that the test questions look like that. I don't call that taking statistics. I call that trying to pass statistics. And I'm not too sure what value that is. All right. Don't forget the test on this unit, the target date in the calendar is the 23rd of July, which is next Thursday. So I would try to get it that day or before, and that way you could leave yourself open for some room to study. Now, you may find it helpful for short explanations about the lessons, and I will do my best to put them in this Unit 4 discussion post so that you can see them. I like learning. I like explaining things. I've had to learn to boil stuff down and not talk so much. I know that's hard to believe, but I hope that in this unit that you'll get a lot out of it, and that if you need help, you'll get help. So I wish each and every one of you well with this effort.